we're ready to get
And
started.
they weren't yelling, they weren't
No.
soliciting people. People were walking over there.
You're all
Not a
set?
big
we're all
sign,
set.
But they were acting totally appropriate.
Don't ring the left hand. Call the meeting to order. First thing on the agenda, if anybody wants to Zoom in, call either 1-312-626-6799 or 1-646-558-8656. Enter meeting ID 977-6119-6006. Press pound and then pound. If your line is muted, press *6 to unmute. And then beginning our meeting, we'll have prayer by Commissioner Wyatt and then pledge by myself.
Lord, we thank you for the opportunity to gather together to administer the governance as we have been elected to do so by our constituents to do the right thing. We ask that your blessing be on this meeting. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have a roll call vote, or roll call, please.
District 1 Commissioner Dan Dean.
Here.
District 2 Commissioner Gary Huberlin.
Here.
District 3 Commissioner Joe Amaro.
Here.
District 5 Commissioner Joel Wyatt.
Present.
District 4 Chairman Bob Coleman.
Here. Any additions or corrections or deletions to the agenda?
I'll move adopt for the agenda as presented. Support.
Motion by Commissioner Dean, supported by Commissioner Eberling, that we adopt the agenda as presented. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same. Motion carried. Any corrections to the minutes?
Mr. Chairman, I go ahead and make a motion to approve the minutes from October 20, 2020.
Support.
Motion by Commissioner Eberling, supported by Commissioner Wyatt, that we approve the minutes of October the 20th. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Approved, or all those disapproved, the same. Motion carried. Correspondence, petitions, and introductions. I do not have anything, not aware of anything. Commissioners report. Commissioner Dean.
I have no report.
Commissioner O'Meara.
The biggest thing is the water agreement between Lexington and Port Sanilac. That has to get done by February. And the good thing is that the pipeline was actually just built by Sanilac Township only and not Sanilac and Lexington. So we did get a mechanism in there to get compensation for the build out of pipeline, and that will help reduce the debt load for each of the individuals along the line. So that's good. It's the more people that get on it, the cheaper it gets for everybody. So that's the best thing I've heard.
How far is it from the end of
8 miles.
8 miles
Yeah.
that they have to add on?
Does that have to add on? Oh, no. They just hook right up. It goes
it's
right
already-
up to the village,
Okay,
all the way through Sanilac Township, north of
So that's the water coming from that.
Lexington.
Yeah,
Lexington, yeah.
Yeah, we built the pipeline, 20 years ago?
okay.
But Lexington Township didn't get in on it, so
Oh,
anyone who gets in on it now has to pay extra.
Oh,
good. Anything else, Joe?
No, I don't have anything else besides that.
Okay.
Thanks.
Commissioner Hebling,
I have nothing to report.
Commissioner Wyatt?
Nothing to add.
Okay, the only thing I have, I'm talking about is designated assessor, and Wendy is not here, she's on vacation or something for a week. So I don't know if we got our last couple of people to make it, so we'd like to get it on the board's agenda, the next board meeting,
Okay.
because it has to be approved.
Mhm.
Otherwise, the state's gonna,
Dictate
Send
who
them.
puts on. Mhm.
yep.
Okay.
So I'm still working, checking on that, but I think Wendy, is she coming back Friday or?
I believe.
I think it's a half a day Friday or something. Okay,
Mr. Colin,
yes,
how many townships have we heard back from?
we've got, I believe it's 14.
So close.
Yeah, we need
You
16.
need 16 out of 31, right?
Yeah, and I think we might have gotten one or two more, and because I went in and checked before I came here, and she said she never heard nothing, but she don't know what's Wendy's got online.
Okay.
Because I know Wendy and I have been talking about that, so hopefully we're there. But we'll get there.
Okay.
Okay, the administrator's report.
Sure, I'll just mention, as we continue to work on our budget process through the rest of this year, I'd really like to see us kind of change our direction next year and focus more on our long-term planning. I did do some research and did some digging in the archives and was able to come across a 1997 strategic plan for the county. It was quite interesting to read through that plan and realize that a lot of the issues we had back 23 years ago, we still have today. Because we really didn't implement anything, but we kind of have the same problems looking forward with regard to our reliance on the delinquent tax revolving fund, discussion just about the segregation, if you will, and maybe not working together as much as we should to reach, the common goals and the best interests of our county constituents. So I really think, moving forward, I know we still have that proposal on the table with that across the board percentage reductions to the departments. While I don't necessarily believe that's the best solution, I do feel it would open up some dialogue where we could work with departments, maybe gain some statistical data and start really looking at performance measures and how we can incorporate those measures into setting long-term goals and really focusing on what our priorities are. Because right now we really don't have a roadmap that will, get us into the future years. So I'd really like to try to turn the direction next year. And if that involves potentially quarterly meetings, at least as we work through 2021, and then also focus on future years going forward. So that was just a little information that I discovered. I can share that strategic plan with you if I can find a way to take it apart. It is binded, but it is quite interesting. I think you would enjoy reading that.
I like the quarterly meeting, so it sounds like a
Yeah.
step forward.
Any questions?
Right, the company that we utilize for wage classification
Yeah.
takes into consideration, I would imagine, different performance metrics.
Mhm.
So there's some data there that can be analyzed, I would suspect, in pursuant to, overall analysis of, how a department is doing perhaps. Is that one of the things we can take advantage of?
It's possible. I mean, I was thinking, I know this strategic plan was designed by MSU Extension. So I would assume there's agencies out there that would potentially help with the strategic planning process. If that's not something we could, get together on our own, with our own resources, but that is a possibility for sure.
I'm asking that because, we have at our fingertips, in a sense, the availability to go out and make that assessment and put it together in a strategic plan, particularly if we've got a blueprint that's already been paid for and established, even though it is 23 years old. It's still, a template of sorts that we can expand on utilizing the data that we've already paid for or have access to. That might be a consideration as we move forward.
Yeah.
To have the initiative on our own, maybe either through the administrative controller's office or some other,
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Any other comments, questions? Okay. Public comments. I don't see any.
Nope, I don't.
Okay, I see Trudy is walking around out there. Investment report, Trudy Bowers.
You want somebody to go and get it?
I don't know, she was right there. I thought she was watching it.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Judy?
This
Brandy?
is my chief deputy treasurer. This is Brandy Brown, who signed the bottom of your report here. She's the one that prepares it for me. She balances it. And if you look on the front page with the blue, those are breaking these all out by investment type. The 002 investment type is like a savings type account, and that large amount at Eastern Michigan Bank is a shared millage account, I believe. And that's why that's got more in that, because we put parks and all the millage monies into a joint shared account and keep track of each one of their balances. At the time of print, the cash accounts had not been balanced because we did this a little bit in advance. And so we don't have any cash line on the very top under the 001. So Christy balances all of the bank accounts, and it takes her a while to dig through that general fund bank account. Everything was done but that. But since we had this done a little early, we thought we'd just present it without doing any cash line on it. So that's why that zero's up at the top. So then, and the 003 is all the certificates of deposit. And then the 010, we just call that a money market account, and those are by bank in the next block. And then we do use some commercial paper at the bottom. Now, the report that she has here in the blue and the white has to balance with our general ledger. So I believe I gave you a copy of this. This is the ledger as it stands. That's what she balances to when she does this report. So we have to make sure that all of our journal entries, that we did them right, that they got posted right. And so usually if we do any type of investing, this last month we had a road CD that matured at Exchange State Bank. It was at 2%.
Do you have any copies of that for distribution?
I emailed them all, but I can give you mine when I get done here. Do you have copies?
I have my copy.
Oh, okay, we'll give you hers. But it was at 2%. It was a 2-year. We redeemed that. The road was in need of some of their funds to finish out their work year on the roads. And so we redeemed that, and to reinvest it, I'm sure was going to be way below 0.5. But so as all of us do, how the rates have come down. Current rates are anywhere from 0.1 to 0.2 if you're lucky. And the short terms are sometimes better than the long term, because if we have, it's rare that I do a 2-year CD, but in the road commission's case, it worked out. The rates had come down, but usually I keep them just as short as possible for the road, because she uses that money. I say she, Terry Taylor and I work together on it. She uses that money all summer, and she keeps good track of where she's at, what she's got left, and books all the interest as we get it. So that's what we do. We balance to the ledger. She has this report here that shows the rates and what they're invested in. And you can see that bottom one in exchange on that top group under road. So these are listed by fund. And these were listed by bank. So we like to give you a little bit of everything so you can see where we're at. But so all of these, that bottom exchange, you can see that one was at 2%. That's the one we just redeemed. So it was invested at 445. I think she got about 464 out of that. But you just bring it back into the cash line. So Exchange gave me a cashier's check and I put that deposit. Every Monday or so, a lot of my banks email me their rates. And this is how we do it. We try to keep track, you know, the local banks, they'll send me an email Monday morning. Here's our current rates. They're nothing to write home about now, but there for a while, you know, it was looking pretty competitive. Now it's just, we're getting 0.1 for all the cash in Eastern right now, the cash lines. So, and there for a while, we weren't getting anything.
You say 0.1,
0.1 is what our current,
not 0.1, no.
0.10.
That's it.
So that's what we're getting right now on everything at Eastern Michigan Bank. That would have been in that top line, that cash line up at the top. So, yeah. Was there anything here that you had a question on? Any investment type? Yes, Joe?
Yeah, you're kind of all over the board in terms of the amounts that you have with the different institutions.
Yes.
And that if you did put 13 million or 15 million in one institution, you would get better service, you would be a preferred customer, you would get, you know, the fees would be waived. You would just have a lot better access and support. That's my only comment.
So you think I should put all my eggs in one basket?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, because you'll get preferred, you'll get a preferred.
Yeah, we used to have a 20% kind of law against that. I thought, where you couldn't have more than 20%. And I'd have to look into that and see, but yeah, I'm just.
Well, we used to do it with Morgan.
Okay. For the retirement or?
No, for all this. And you would like Kathy Dorman did it, and you commingle everything, put it in, give it to one institution.
Oh, because
And
when I took over.
Morgan would quarterback it and we would get better returns and better.
Okay.
It's just, you know, when you got so many different accounts and so many different institutions.
Because they're my
really
constituents.
Yeah,
They
well.
pulled me into office, you know?
Well,
They're my taxpayers.
Yeah, that would fall under the quid pro quo
You know,
methodology, which we don't really.
Yeah, and I know, my view is to keep as much as a bit here local. You got a lot of banks here, you know, in the county. We try to put a little in each one to kind of share the love kind of thing, you know?
It shouldn't be, it's a good idea that shouldn't be dismissed and should be looked at.
Okay.
And
I
reviewed like annually as rates go up, because you're going to find that some of your little banks just can't compete once rates start going up, which is inevitable 2 or 3 years out with all the deficit spending that we're incurring. It's just going to go, it's going to get pretty, I don't know if it's going to get the Carter administration 20%, but we will experience rates going up eventually.
Yeah, when I came into office in 12, the rates were about where they're at right now. So I was really excited when they started to go up.
Yeah.
And we were seeing 1%, 2%, even as much as 3%. And we were making good interest on that. And then, you know, the bottom fell out.
Yeah, I think you had one conversation with Ken, right, from Morgan?
Oh, yeah, he might, yeah, I think I did.
Yeah.
He called me. Mhm. Yeah,
I wouldn't take it off the table. I mean,
Okay.
You'll certainly save on fees and stuff.
I don't pay any fees at Eastern. We have a deal. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's all
I don't pay any fees, so that's our deal.
There's a lot of banks here that you have on your list. 15.
Yeah, there's a lot of banks here. I try to keep diversified a little bit, you know. And there's some things, the last few things I've done with JP Morgan, they like to sell callable CDs. And they've been called the last few times I've had any with them. So they'll say, nope, you're done. We're pulling the plug and we'll pay you what we owe you, but we're not gonna keep this investment here anymore.
Okay.
So,
No, I have a question.
Yes.
So, Joe, in reference to what you were talking about, it's not really putting all your eggs in one basket. It's putting it with a company and they diversify it as they see fit. Is that the idea?
Yeah.
But you're using a professional money manager to do so with the expectation that with all the other duties you have, maybe they'll experience better. Couldn't you have them specify 30% in local products or services? I mean, what's the objective of this board who has the ultimate responsibility of the investment?
Right.
We're utilizing the treasurer because maybe it's an easy streamlined process since that's where the money passes through.
Mhm.
But ultimately, it's our responsibility to make the decision where it goes, whether we want to, spend all the money locally and have it just within our county or within Michigan, or whether or not we use a professional money manager. So can't we have a combination of the two? Can't there be something whereby we have a professional money manager that doesn't cost us, there's an advantage to it, but that they specify local investment?
So are you
Think it would
talking,
be
can I
no
interject a
cost?
question to you? You're talking about putting it, say Edward Jones and saying Edward Jones put 30% in the local bank. I'm not sure an Edward Jones can do something like that.
No, I wouldn't do that. I mean.
But
'cause
we have to be careful the types of investment.
Right, we have to be in
You
compliance
know,
with PA 20.
we can't be putting anything in some foreign entity, and sometimes it's hidden in there. Kathy found that once with the Michigan class. They were doing the investment for her, and it was an investment pool, and she found they had foreign accounts that we were invested in, which is unlawful.
We hear about that. I hear about that occasionally. I'll read about that. And, there's so many layers down the road that it's hard to keep track of that. I can't imagine this falling in your lap to do all that backtracking. I mean, I imagine you're taking it from chemical and USB and Eastern and whatnot, that they're not doing that they're not doing business with foreign entities. You rely on their word to do so.
We've actually had one of them that we had to look into, and that was a private bank, and that's 201 funds. So, I mean, it does happen.
Where they got their corporate office moved to Canada.
But isn't what Joe, isn't what you're referencing here, though, the bang for the buck?
Yeah.
We've got money that the taxpayers pay.
Yep.
We want to get as much revenue as possible, but we also have to balance it, I think, with, we live in a community of taxpayers whose money this is, and they are serviced by banks that need to stay afloat to service the local constituents. How do we balance both of it? Is this the answer? Is the county treasurer, having to spend hours a week investigating this? Is that the best use of the resources?
Yeah, Trudy, I mean, if you
Is there a
go to
better
a
way to-
Citibank or a Morgan, you're going to get the resources available through those people, and they have the best PhDs in the world working on this stuff, and you tell them what your objectives are. We have to be PA 20 compliant, blah, blah, blah. I mean, you're going to get the probability of getting a better result is much higher than if you go into Eastern Michigan Bank because, or, the bank, I guess that's the Carsonville Bank, right? Yeah, I mean,
So.
you don't have the same
Do
resources.
you want to hire a manager to do that?
You don't need to hire a manager. to do
You don't? They'll do
No.
it for nothing.
They will. I mean,
No percentage, nothing.
I can tell you from my personal experience, I don't pay anything.
Okay.
I don't pay anything.
And they would they would report.
When I call,
directly.
they drop everything and pick up the
Oh,
phone.
well. I'm
That's where
sorry, I don't
you
get
can get that. You can get that.
I just find it difficult to believe, no offense, Trudy, that your skill sets and capabilities are such that it maximizes the potential that we have greater to the extent that the professionals doing it would be able to do, not, including what they would charge us to do so. Because if that's the case, what are you doing here as a treasurer? Why aren't you making big bank do an investment? I'm not doubting the integrity and earnestness in which you do this, but I can't possibly imagine that we can't be improved upon and still have some kind of local diversification.
Okay. Now, Joel, we do rely on our banks to help to make them decisions for investment.
Yeah, it's just a matter of who's got the better
We work with
resources.
our banks, just like you said with JP Morgan, we do work with them to get their professional opinion with our investments.
Yeah,
But we have to be careful too. If we're looking for someone to get, so you get a free ride, so to speak, that, okay, you're getting 1% where you should be getting 2%. They may keep that back and they're not going to charge you anything, but they're making 1%.
Well, but in return for them.
that's all disclosed, Bob. There's no secrets.
Their benefit from having our business is that they can pay us 2% and turn around and loan that money to someone who's running a mortgage for 4 or 5%. That's how they make their money. So I think Trudy's point is well taken, that by investing that money in our local banks, they're turning around and investing it in the community. They're making a profit off of it while paying us hopefully the going rate, which, you know, unless you get pretty creative with your investment beyond what the law would permit with public funds, you're not likely to improve upon the return that's available right now, which is pretty small.
Pretty small.
Is that the case where we're at right now, is that the return across the board is so small because of the economic conditions?
Yes.
So were this a different time period where you had, you know, interest rates in the double digits, you see a difference? It might be that, wow, yeah, we can do much
also
better.
be borrowing money at those higher interest rates for things too. But how long ago was it when you got the 2% for the road commission?
That was a 2-year CD.
So 2 years ago, you were able to get 2%.
Yes.
That was impressive even 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and we do, like I say, they email me with the current rates. The local banks know my limitations. They know as a municipality that we have restrictions as to what types of investments we can make, you know. So we have that relationship with all of our investment people that they know, you know, that, you know, we can't do anything outside of the law.
Trudy, sorry. What percent are short term? You just said something.
Short term, like 9 months, 6 month, 9 months. So they're at the 0.15, you know, right now.
What percentage of the investments would you say?
weren't any better, you know,
Yeah.
further out. So
Or 80%, 80%?
0.17 in here, you know, if you look down through it, a lot of the smaller rates are more current. You can see there's a couple of them like that 2% was there, and then most of them are back down. So most of those larger ones are gone. They've either been called or redeemed or reinvested. Most times I just reinvest, and depending on the market, if you think that maybe that market's gonna improve, do a short term, do a 6 month, do a 9 month, you know, that's the way I look at it. But the last guy I talked to, my investment, John Amon from Multibank Securities, says it's gonna be years now before this improves. He said probably 2023 before we see improvement substantially. So that's a guy that's in the business, and he tells me what he's getting from his people, and this is what I rely on.
So there's so little profit and return for investments available that it's negligible whether you invest with someone like Morgan Stanley or you continue using the investment strategy of these various banks. If it was a greater return, it might be more advantageous for us to consider using a professional and taking advantage of the differences.
I imagine, I'm not sure how the policy reads, but it is up to the Board of Commissioners if you want to assign the investments to an investment manager instead of the treasurer. I would think that we could look into that.
Wouldn't that come with a cost? Joe, you said it didn't cost you anything. I've never, and I could be wrong, but anytime you invest with a money manager, usually upfront cost or long-term cost with that. You're saying no?
Access to.
With that?
I don't pay any fees for anything.
Now, my only question with that, with using an investment manager, is what happens when one of the funds needs cash? At the end of the year, Trudy and I will go through and look at which funds need cash, and we can go to our local banks and withdraw that money to put it in their cash line.
Mhm.
How is an investment manager gonna know which funds need cash when?
Well, you maintain that. You have to keep the books and records clean. They can commingle all the
But
funds,
what if,
but you're responsible for that. And then you pull it out. You tell them you need money for this.
but what if they locked it up in a certificate of deposit that's a 9-month CD?
Well, that's why you do your cash flow projections. You should have that. So you understand what your cash flow needs are so that you can invest according to what your needs are.
But if he's the
And that you
investment
never-
manager,
and
he
that
should be
you
doing that,
never-
not
you-
me.
No, totally wrong.
Okay,
And that you never get caught shorthanded. If you're, tending to your knitting and doing a good job, you should be all over this stuff. I mean, I don't look at the rates that you're getting. I look at the process because the process is what's going to get you a good result.
But
And if you
given,
have good processes in place right now, and I'm not convinced that you do, when rates go up, you won't be flat-footed again. I just think that you need to take a look at what you
To
do.
maintain the level of liquidity that we need to have the flexibility that you need, that's going to diminish your ability to get a higher return on the money. So
Well, it depends on
that's
what
the
you
trade-off,
need. Yeah, you plan accordingly and you maximize it. I mean, that's.
And
They're already
needs-
doing it, you would continue doing it.
well, the needs of each fund are different. It's like we talked about the road.
Well, I know, but.
Her summers are busy and she needs money. I mean,
Yeah.
so we try not to tie any of her money up, in
You
the
set those
summertime.
parameters.
Your parks, same way, right? I mean, they've got projects going and we have to keep right on top of their cash line and make sure that we have money available and not tied up.
and not only that, like this year, we know it unforeseeables, like what, if they need money, like now that they didn't necessarily see before, we don't have all of our funds tied up.
I mean, what you're explaining is just basic management of money, which you guys should have the capability of doing.
Okay.
I mean, that's just basic.
And with the taxation, like all our millage funds, they start coming in December.
Yeah.
So our county operating starts coming in July. You can see our cash line for county operating has pulled its way back out of the negative and we're back on top again in the black. So everything rotates around how those funds come in as well. So.
Yeah.
In the end, though, are you saying, is it your contention that you're doing better, looking at the bottom line when you roll in all the costs and the disadvantages, maybe, that you're doing better than a professional
Oh,
money
I didn't
manager would
say
do?
that. No,
No,
pardon me. If you
And I'm
think
not,
I'm
I'm asking you if that's the case, because I look at it much more simply than Joe or you look at it, because I'm simple. But I would say the Board of Commissioners should have a position whereby local entities receive a benefit from the very taxes that are generated in that locality in things like investment. But there's a limit to that. You put a percentage to it. We talked about when we buy product and services, we say a local entity in Sanilac County gets a 5 or a 10%, add-on for being in the community for whatever their bid is, right? Because they're in the community, right? I think that's a good thing to do by resourcing. Could not the same mindset be applied here? And I know right now, because the returns are so small that you're not going to see that really happening at this point. Is what I'm gathering what you're saying. But as the economy turns around in a few years and the profit margin is greater, that may be a consideration where you assign a percentage local. And I can't imagine why Morgan Stanley or whoever, Edward Jones, whoever can do that can meet all the federal guidelines and requirements, can maintain cash liquidity if you assign the parameters to them and invest locally. All those things can be done. And then you'd have to say, can they do it better than I'm doing it now? Because you have to take into consideration, you've got a lot of other jobs to do as well. How much time and can you invest into that? And the next question is there any staff in your office that has to do work while this project is being done? So while you're managing the county's money and investing it and going to the banks and having those conversations and all the activities that take process in order to build this out, are there staff in your office that are doing work that could be otherwise done by either yourself or Brandy or, yeah. Because Brandy's your deputy.
Chief deputy.
You're allowed to have a deputy. Is there any work that can be done by other staff if you were not doing that? You or Brandy was not assigned to that.
In my office, the jobs are union positions and they each have their own. There's, between Brandy and I, we're the only ones that manage these funds.
Right.
The other two are union positions that have other work they do, tax foreclosure.
Yeah.
And the other one is the delinquent tax clerk.
If Morgan Stanley was working on this project and you weren't, wouldn't you and Brandy have time to do those other positions if indeed you had a less staffing?
No,
Why not?
because this is,
When I do this report, like I take the bank statements and I do this report. I still do cash receipting and all that. So my job would not be free of my time for anything else.
13 of this.
I can't take the duties that Tina or Tracy are doing in lieu of this.
neither one of the other two girls can do these.
Yeah, that's
They don't
my
have
point.
access to the ledger.
That's my whole point. If you
Okay.
weren't doing these, if, for example, the professional money manager was doing this, that, I see, yes, let's free up some time.
But Joe says that we still have to do all of this cash flow stuff, right? We still have to
You
do
only,
it.
you have $13 million invested, right?
Yes.
So you have $20 million just sitting in the bank. Correct, because this report says you've got cash and investments of 33 million.
Okay,
So you've got $20 million getting nothing.
okay.
And that's because we can't figure out what our cash flow needs are. Because you sure don't need $20 million in the bank
Okay,
today. $20 million, our budget's only 15. The total that we spend in the year for all of the funds is about 25 million, and you've got 20 million in the bank. You need to do something to improve the performance.
okay.
It's pretty bad. That's unacceptable. You're not going to spend $20 million in the next 2 weeks, are you, Brandy?
It's up to the parks and the road.
They're not going to
and
spend
those
$20
are
million
their funds.
in the next month,
They're not our
the
funds.
next 3 months. Come on.
Okay.
You got $20 million in cash. Getting zero. I don't care. It's the process that you have to improve. It's not the rate that, because your current process is not sufficient.
Okay,
Because when rates are at 7% and you've got $20 million, you're really missing out on significant money every month. And you have to improve your process.
Where are you getting 7%?
I'm just saying, when rates go up,
Okay, well.
Dan, it's not about where the rates
But
are.
I would disagree with Joel's premise that a money manager would assume duties currently being performed by the staff here. They would be assuming the duties currently being performed by the banks that we're doing business with and the advice we're giving.
Well, they're spending hours per
I know,
week.
and they would still need to. I mean, we're not gonna turn all of our financial management over to a firm. The people have entrusted Trudy to manage these funds. She's hired the staff that assist her with that. I think the decisions they're making now would still have to be made, only you'd be communicating with perhaps a advisor.
Let's get back to the big point. You've got $20 million. What are you going to do to do a better job of managing the
That's
cash?
not all our funds to decide on what they're going to do. It's like the parks, that is their board to decide.
You can commingle these funds. You can commingle them into a single account. Why do we have $20 million in cash?
Are you gonna tell the road commission how to spend their funds?
No, you're going to work with them and you're going to get them the money they need when they need it.
we do. We
So
do.
why do we have $20 million in cash? Because you certainly don't need $20 million in cash today.
They're not all our decision. We just do the investing. When the funds need them, we provide them. We make sure they're liquid when they need them.
What is the role of the treasurer if you're not managing the cash? All of this is under your umbrella.
You're telling me all of a sudden the road commission, has a big hole that opens up that costs $15 million and they need it tomorrow?
No, it doesn't work like
I
that.
mean, there's
Never.
90 days bill out for any services
This business
provided.
is so regular and so predictable that you can schedule it all out. I mean, you could launch a missile according to how predictable our business is. This would be no problem. You should be able to do it just like in Apollo 11. You can get that kind of precision and get a better return because it's the process that we have to work on, not the rates. Because it was it's a good time to work on it now because we're not really losing that much money. But when you got, that much money sitting around, and it's been like that forever, I would imagine, that ratio is probably pretty strong.
Dan, you mentioned earlier, you said something about the people in trust, something treasure, money, what did you say?
Well, through the election process, she has statutory and constitutional duties entrusted to her by the people by being elected as a county treasurer.
But
Again, there are responsibilities that the Board of Commissioners has as well.
Right.
But I think to look at public funds as if it were personal investments, it's a different animal. You have the variety of agencies you're working with. You have liquidity needs throughout the year. You have funds coming in through tax payments at two main points in the year. It's not like the pension fund where you have a lump sum basically that you can invest and get a good return on. It's just a different animal.
It's a business that is predictable.
Yeah.
And
I think everybody looks for improvement, but again, I think you can't simplify it to the point of just saying we have $20 million and we can just go out and invest it. There are timetables and liquidity needs for the agencies.
So let's schedule it out so we know what we're talking about. We're not.
But I'm not sure it's quite as predictable as you think from year to year. I think they do have
Definitely.
unexpected needs that come up.
It's
Well,
very.
there must be a happy medium between what you're saying and what he's saying.
Yeah.
There must be some improvement that is available out there. And the question is whether the improvement can be brought about through you in the manner in which you're doing it currently, or it needs a professional money manager to do it.
We're a service organization. 85% of our costs are payroll and benefit related. That is extremely predictable business. The only outliers might be, the roads, but I'm pretty sure that we know when we have to do, we're doing regular grading of the roads. We know when new projects are coming in. That's so predictable that it's the construction industry is extremely predictable.
Well, a third of that 20 million you referenced would be delinquent tax, which isn't completely predictable. Your rate of delinquency would vary from year to year, but
6 million, right?
well, that's about a third of 20.
Well, but still, what do we do? That should not be sitting,
But again, you're paying off your local governments. You have needs throughout the year with that money.
right,
as well.
again,
So,
measurable and predictable, and to just keep a lump sum of cash in there because you have to pay it out twice a year, doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense.
So ultimately, what are we looking at doing here? We're asking questions, you're giving a report.
I give a
I certainly
report.
appreciate the work that
we've
you
offered input. I think the county treasurer can take that and
Are we satisfied with it, or rather, I'd like to point the question to you is it possible that you can take some of the questions that Joe had and the advice of doing a better job of
putting it all in one
prioritizing expenditures in the future?
I think the big question is figuring out the cash flow needs. I'll bet if you look at your cash balance every month for the last 3 years, that it would be constantly $20 million.
Except for general fund,
Except for general fund.
that was in the whole 2 million. Now,
Okay.
who's covering that?
That's how
The
we do
other
it.
funds.
That's how we do it.
Mhm.
Okay, so there you go. Now, when does that arise? We all know that. Let's schedule that out so you can see it, so we're not guessing. It doesn't make sense to sit here and just guess.
Well, I think Judy's got a lot of different inputs today. She can look at it and then if need be, come back and just tell us what you found out.
Okay,
And then we can go from there.
okay. Thank you for your time.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Here you go, Brandy. Do you want your report?
You can keep it if you'd like it.
Okay, thanks.
The public hearing, community development block grant.
we get to declare the public hearing open.
Did you want me to mention
You want me to read that,
about
Bill?
what that project?
Mhm.
Go
It
ahead.
would be helpful, yeah.
Well, just so you're aware, we're receiving just a little bit of delay with our communication with our specialist. But I know the last time we talked, we discussed about trying to implement some telemedicine in the school district. And because this is on such a tight timeline, we have to have this money spent by the end of the year. Bryant, our health officer, has been working with medical staff, and he's determining that the money would be better suited for some type of a mobile clinic, which would serve the communities. It would provide COVID-19 testing. It could provide immunizations and vaccine delivery, and then also an education platform for community outreach for wellness and then adolescent health for school-age children. So that's where we're currently looking at utilizing these funds for, and what that would be would be a mobile unit. So what we would have to do between now and the end of the year is purchase some type of a mobile unit and have it designed for the needs of this project.
Does that come out of his budget or ours?
This would come out of these grant funds. We have just shy of $100,000 to utilize. Unfortunately, this email was sent out on October 21st to our specialist. We have not heard from her at this point in time. But currently that is what we're proposing the scope of the project be. Obviously that could change as we move further towards the end of the year and we have less time to implement a major project.
So when COVID's over, what do we do with the van?
Well, it would still be utilized for immunizations. And then it would be used in the schools as well for adolescent health is what Bryant is.
The health department's identified several areas where something like this can be utilized once this COVID purpose is no longer a preeminent issue. Like she said, immunizations, delivery of healthcare off-site, where right now a lot of folks are inhibited from coming to the health department because of transportation issues. That's why they're working with the Sanilac Transportation Corporation to help facilitate that. And that would fall in line with actually not just parking this thing in the parking lot until the next COVID, but rather utilizing it through the years. So, of course, you know, that'll be staffing. Once
That'll be
the health
staffing, that'll
department
be
opens up,
insurance,
they're
that'll
not
be
gonna lose
more
staff, so yeah.
people. I think we better take a better look at this
Yeah.
long term.
Nevertheless, though, the cost, you know, if I understand it correctly, the cost of this piece of equipment is going to be paid for through the grant.
Correct.
And the staffing of it would fall on us unless it was specifically COVID related once that.
Well,
That-
typically, if you're mobilizing a clinic, you would already have staff covering that
Yeah.
clinic at the health department. Those staff would then, be moved off-site, whether that be utilizing this mobile piece of equipment or.
So it doesn't have to be an asset that we have to keep utilizing necessarily in order to fall within the guidelines of the grant. It can sit vacant in the parking lot if that's what they choose, but they've already specified that they have lots of opportunities to do that. The question, like you're saying, Gary, is, the staffing for that additional cost they're in, but
Yeah, I look at it long term because down the road, we're gonna get requests for more staffing, more insurance, gas, upkeep.
and those requests can be denied. Now, there would be an upkeep of the equipment, which is why I'm an advocate of a trailer rather than a mobile vehicle. But the majority of the cost for the piece of equipment, though, is paid for through the grant, and its upkeep is rather minimal, I think, compared to the initial cost.
But can't they utilize something from our Sanilac Transportation?
Well, the thing is that they did discuss that at the Sanilac board. Bryant came over, it was discussed a little bit. Yeah, the idea was they do have equipment that could be modified, but because this grant is available, is that the best use of the resources? Because when that required need is over with, to demobilize that piece of equipment, that bus, say, for example, and use it for regular transportation could be quite costly and really not effective in the end, as opposed to a dedicated vehicle.
Well, there must be something that we could look at to purchase or whatever through that grant, other than transportation. I don't know what's up.
Yeah, it just seems like we're trying to come up with an idea to spend the money, and it definitely wasn't something like we were waiting around for years to get a mobile
It is a grant that's available, and we're looking to find a use for it. There are several opportunities for use. That's legitimate. The objective, because right now they're housed over at the Sanilac Transportation Company because there's some heated areas over there. The purpose of it could be utilized in lieu of that, where they could go to a specific location, they could set up, they could have maybe mobile testing with some tents and drive-throughs in parking lots or whatnot. So there is a use for it, but it isn't that it's a use that absolutely has to be fulfilled through this particular device. It is, here's a grant available, can you make use of it? So that is where we're at. Wouldn't you say, Tara?
Mhm.
I'd like to see though, what other items, if you want to do, that is available that this grant, we could go to this grant to purchase.
Alternate uses of the grant, yeah.
I guess, any staffing cost would be absorbed by the health department,
Mhm.
not this.
Or
one.
other healthcare professionals or
Correct.
organizations.
I think, when you see, I've seen enough lines up of little kids getting vaccinations there, if they can, spread that out. We are the largest county geographically in the Lower Peninsula. Hypothetically, if a vaccine comes out for COVID next year, the potential for something like this to provide, to assist with the vaccinating of people. I think we've gotten recommendation from the people who could best utilize this. I don't see where there's any danger of additional cost in the general fund. And I think it is time sensitive.
It is, yeah.
So
Yeah, there's.
I would hate to see it lost,
There's long-lasting maintenance costs for sure.
Well, the health department, through their programming, a lot of their reimbursement through Medicaid,
Mhm.
I'll make it eligible probably for some cost to be absorbed through that as well.
Right. This funding, there's a lot of strings attached to this money. You have to meet certain criteria. So we don't even know that this project is yet.
But the 20% poverty rate, we certainly would meet that. in this
Yes,
competition.
yeah, you have to meet certain criteria.
Yeah, all these block grants, you have to have all the LBGYN, blah, 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 all that stuff.
And I understand it, and
Yeah.
I maybe sound like against it, but I don't want this to turn in 2 years down the road. This becomes a burden to the county to update the technology, update. That's what I'm saying.
To me, it just sounds like, we're just a government entity trying to spend money. There's no real need. I mean, if you need to vaccinate kids in Port Sanilac, use Bart Shanny, just all the voting precincts, you just go there. It doesn't happen that often.
You're right, Joe. You're absolutely
I
right.
mean, why spend money if it's just for the purpose of spending money?
There's other ways to get people to the health department to receive that kind of stuff.
I don't know. I don't like.
But right now, those
That's
other
just
ways
spend
are
money.
being paid for by a federal grant, by a community block grant. That's the problem.
But we've certainly benefited from COVID funding and a lot of other things throughout the year.
Yeah.
We're hearing from the health department, they see a legitimate use for this. Has the health board met to discuss this, Joe? Since it's come about?
This is the first time I heard about it.
Okay.
And I've attended all the meetings.
I guess, I don't know when their next meeting is or if they could offer input,
I think we're
specific
still,
input.
we're
Yeah.
kind of still in the planning stage because we haven't received an answer as to whether this project meets their criteria.
Maybe we could request a more specific proposal from the health department and their input on how it would be utilized. I don't think they get it to us in 2 weeks and a half.
When's the deadline for that?
Well, the money has to be spent by the end of the year. So even at this rate.
No,
it's
for
not
getting
gonna be
the
too
grant.
difficult. We've already sent a letter of interest, but I don't think it means that we have to spend the money.
Are we competing with other
No,
agencies for
this
this
was
money?
earmarked for our county. So they did, like I said, we received just under 100,000. Most surrounding counties received double. I don't know why ours was so low, but that's just what they earmarked for our county.
So if we turned in this occasion to take advantage of it, it wouldn't necessarily be funds going to another community.
I would think that they would redistribute it. I mean, we did ask if there was additional funding. We had explored the idea of telemedicine with Dr. Hammond. And it sounded like it was something that, was of interest for the local hospitals.
At least we've conducted the public hearing, so we can
Yes, this is
proceed or
one of
not
the-
proceed from this point.
Okay.
And I would suggest then, having done that, we can just await further input
Yes.
from the health board on a specific proposal they might utilize this for. That would be my suggestion.
So when we get down to resolution, then
We
we,
could table that and then put it on our agenda for our next meeting and hopefully receive more information from the health board.
The resolution's actually very generic. It doesn't mention the project in there. So if we're able to adopt the resolution, that would be helpful to keep us on track if we do want to spend this money by the end of the year.
We're not pulling the trigger on accepting the offer necessarily. We're just saying
No, we're just,
willing to proceed further.
right.
That seems reasonable.
That seems reasonable. I would
Yeah.
hate to see us lose it and then want it later on because we haven't acted quickly enough.
And they may implement some extensions. I mean, based on the fact that we haven't really heard from our specialists in several weeks.
so this resolution is just to look into it more.
Yeah, it just, it basically outlines what some of our criteria is
Yeah.
for
Joe,
spending money.
I feel like you had a philosophical statement to make about this in the sense of like, just because it's free money, it's not free. It's coming from taxpayers.
Right, I made that.
And we shouldn't use it simply because we're afraid some other government entity will snap it up. Maybe we should make a statement saying it's not really necessary at this point in time and it's better not to be wasted.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like this is, we have our things, our objectives that we're trying to achieve, and this wasn't even on the list. We have our top priorities.
Well, you're talking in a manner that's extremely conservative and not just grabbing it because it's available necessarily, right? I mean,
You're talking to a guy that drove an Aztec for 20 years.
I like where you're going with this philosophically. I think that's the right thing to do. We lose sight of that when federal, grants are available or funds that, hey, if you don't grab it, and it's probably better that we set a stance of, is this absolutely necessary? Because ultimately taxpayers are paying for it, not directly and not just directly, but indirectly in the future, because this becomes one of those institutional standards that now delivery of home health care through the government is required. And before you know it, as Gary said, we're on board for paying for everything.
It's the culture, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I like to run things tight. That's why I made those comments to Trudy. I want to run it tight.
No, I think I'm glad we had this conversation about it, and it definitely
Well-
deserves a little bit better communication on what we're hoping to achieve.
Okay,
If it could turn it into an ice cream truck or something, then I'm fine. We can make some money with it. Sell the ice cream in the summer.
I was thinking White Castle myself.
Like, yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
so we made a public hearing, we got that out. And we'll discuss that a little bit more when we get to the resolution. Okay? Appointments to standing committees, I don't have any commissioner appointments, none that I know of, county commissioner chair appointments, none. General resolution, community development block grant. You wanna read part of that, Gary?
Which one you want?
Community development on page 3.
Oh, yeah, good. The coronavirus aid relief and economic security at CARES Act Public Law 6136 makes available supplemental community development block grant, CDBG and Emergency Solutions Grant, ESG-CV as in Victor, finding for grants to prepare for, responded to coronavirus COVID-19. The CDBG grant will provide flexible for guarantee expenditure, expedite the use of grant, finds it to help it address the challenges facing our nation during this historic public health crisis. Whereas the Michigan Strategic Fund has invited counties to accept community block grant program fund to support the CDBG CARES funding, and whereas the Sanilac County will receive $93,667 in CDBG fund to reimburse for unexpected costs associated with the COVID-19, and whereas the allocation will benefit all residents of the project area and 20% of the residents of the county of Sanilac are low and moderate income persons determined by Sanilac County census data. Now, therefore, resolved, the Sanilac County hereby designates the Board of Commissioners chairman and as a certifying officer, the person authorized to certify the Michigan CDBG pre-agreement documents, the person authorized to sign the grant agreement and payments payment and request a person authorized to execute the additional documents required to carry out and complete the grant.
Support.
Support,
Could we have a little more discussion on this?
we had a motion by Commissioner Heberlin, supported by Commissioner Dean. Any discussion?
Yeah, I don't see where this is specific to the health department and
Yeah,
is it?
I don't think so either.
So
No, it's
if
not.
this is for reimbursement of unexpected costs associated with COVID, can we broaden our thinking and look for unexpected costs associated with COVID?
We don't have to put all of our
The
estimates in one
only,
bucket.
now, I did sit on a meeting with us and we did have a committee set up to come up with an idea, which consisted of the sheriff, Bryant, and then Dr. Hammond to review this. The only other cost we could use this for would be overtime for public safety. So if you wanted to go that route, we certainly can,
Overtime for the sheriff department?
our public safety.
Where did you say the only thought process?
The only other allowable option. We looked at equipment. There was quite a lengthy meeting about this. Like I said, there's a lot of strings attached to this funding. So there's only certain things that you can utilize it for. And based on expenses already incurred, we could use it for overtime for public safety.
How about, Sandusky Police or Marlette Police, or do those guys incur some expenses that we could utilize this grant for?
But not only, yeah, you're right. That's good. Not only the sheriff, but get the local department.
Could we use it that way?
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
We'll get to
Use
it,
it
yeah.
that way.
Let's just open it up a little bit. Rather than-
I wish I would have known this a few meetings ago when I brought this up to you guys.
Yeah.
We'll get it taken care of. I'll meet with the committee again and let them know that you've had a change of direction.
Well, it's not a change in direction. We're just asking for additional.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if this trailer motorhome idea is like the biggest, most pressing need, then tell them to, show the data that it's absolutely necessary.
I think from a medical standpoint, that's what they were focused on. So, but we can go back to the drawing board. I think we still have time.
But Tara, potentially, we could supplant some of this money into the overtime line in our own current budget.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Haven't you already?
That's on our own budget.
Well, yes, we received a payroll reimbursement, so we can't use the same grant for
The same hours, right.
Well, so we have to be careful.
So the overtime by the sheriff's office right now is severely over, correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
So that could be used for that.
Mhm.
Don't that enhance us to keep doing that perpetual every year?
But we pay overtime every year, and that line traditionally has been an area of contention, but
Yeah.
Can you look into redistribution for businesses that have incurred costs in Sanilac County because of COVID? We know that they've lost the ability for restaurants to have, then they have to have extra precautions and sanitizing agents. There's a lot of costs on these businesses. Why can't we hand that down to those businesses that have incurred additional costs?
That's another good idea.
Well, there's businesses, there's churches, there's several people that have had to stick extra money into.
a lot of your larger businesses have received substantial help through the CARES Act. And
Yeah, I was gonna ask that.
Bob and Jamie's gotten anything?
I
No,
don't
I doubt it. I don't know. They've gotten,
Larger employers,
keep
yeah.
open, but yeah. That was usually to keep them from laying people off, I think, Dan, those earlier funds.
Correct, but still was beneficial.
Yeah.
Okay, we have right now the motion and supported. Any more discussion? Okay, all in favor, and the way I understand it is Tara is gonna look at different areas that possibly we could use this. Is that correct? Then we'll bring it back.
Yes.
Does that sound fair to everyone?
Bob, I think you have to declare the public hearing closed before we vote on it.
I skipped that, didn't I?
Well, now would be the time to do it.
Yeah, okay. I'm gonna make
Motion
that
to close
motion.
the public hearing.
No, the chair just does that.
Chair just close it?
Okay, I'll make a motion, we close the public hearing.
Support.
He just declares.
Just declare it closed.
Okay, so now we're to.
Voting on the
okay,
motion.
What we talked about on this motion.
Close enough.
Do you have what you need? Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
No, it's gonna be
Roll call vote,
Oh, resolution, I'm sorry, yeah, you're right.
Commissioner Dean,
yes.
Commissioner Heberlin,
Yes.
Commissioner Romero,
Yes.
Commissioner Wyatt,
Yes.
and Chairman Conley.
Yes, motion carried. Okay. Any committee reports?
I'll report from the broadband committee. The broadband committee met, I don't remember if we included this in the last meeting or not, but there was a movement forward to distribute a online survey that'll be running for a month and a half or so that will help determine the various needs in the county. And it's more specific because like the ISPs that were here said, yeah, they do surveys, but essentially they do a very rough survey to see, is it worth to spend any money in this community because who's going to sign up for it? We don't have enough people. Whereas this Connected Nation is a nonprofit and the Michigan branch is paid for by the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. So that's where they receive their funding. And what they have is they have an online survey component that is tailored for your community. And it is asks questions that gives them a better picture to be able to present to, let's say, an ISP. It's actually owned by the county, the Board of Commissioners that has that. So it's not that this information is just disseminated to anybody, but it'll provide a mechanism by which they can evaluate that data and consider to a greater degree whether they can push forward. It also opens up the, what do I want to say? The county government, the ISPs working together to gain access to grant funding and other revenue streams that otherwise would preclude them since they're not working together. So that was an interesting take. We had 3 or 4 ISPs represented here. They were all on board with, something of this nature. There
You
was
say ISP or ISD?
ISP, Internet Service Provider.
Okay.
And I want to say I presented this already last meeting, no?
No, because the meeting would follow.
Was it?
Yeah, you had it.
So, because Joe had mentioned that you sent out that email about Comcast and we had a meeting after.
That was prior
Yeah,
to our last meeting.
so Comcast participated in it.
You got Carl in there?
Yeah, well, Comcast, all they're doing is they're upgrading existing service. They're not pushing any new cable anywhere really to anything.
So all that fiber optic was already there?
All of that was just, that whole PR was done for letting folks know that, hey, Comcast is going to be upgrading the services in the available area that we already are in.
Yeah.
We're not going anywhere else.
Okay.
That's what ended up happening. Everybody's mouths here were like, are you kidding me? Because we all thought that was a bigger deal. Now, what was discussed?
But they invested $11 million or so.
In the existing area.
I just want to let you know, I never thought that. That's why I questioned.
That's what you thought? Yeah.
No, because they said they were going that far
Yeah.
and that's it. And so they left the rest of the community out. And that's why I
Yep.
thought, and I get frustrated with it, and I get frustrated because I don't understand some things like you're describing here. But my thought and my understanding was we put this group together because there was state and federal money
Yeah.
to initiate these outlying areas. And it sounded to me now like we're at a roadblock again. And
No.
Comcast did a great sales pitch for nothing because it don't reach a quarter of the people in Sanilac County.
The
I'm sorry
Comcast,
for my frustration, but that's where I'm at.
the Comcast ad or notification, gave an idea to this group in particular that, oh, wow, they're considering pushing out and expanding their footprint of service. It turns out to be that's not the case. They were just improving the existing footprint, which puts us in the same position as it was before. The opening up into the funding that you mentioned, well, the Connected Nation representative, Dan Manning, said that that's what a good thing about having the connectedness of the the Board of Commissioners group and the ISPs is because it opens up funding that otherwise is only relegated to just the internet service providers themselves or the communities themselves, and missing out on the ones where you're working together on a venture.
There was in the past funding available for municipalities. That's how an area up in the UP got fiber pushed throughout the whole, was it township or county? I can't remember now. I think it might have been a county, which was incredible to think about. But that opportunity has since moved on and it is no longer available to that extent. So once this survey is completed, and I just got an email saying what, like 300 people had signed up or filled it out, something like that. So once this is completed, the way the guy from Dan Manning says is that it's useful. They're currently doing it in Lapeer County and several other counties in Michigan. And that has proven successful in other areas to consider expanding tower locations. In some cases, fiber optic, in other cases, improved cellular distribution. So it's definitely a positive. And the good news is it is being funded through the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. So the county itself is not really out anything in working with this.
So I guess the real question, though, what's the bottom line? What's the chance of ever getting fiber optic?
It's unlikely that fiber optic, which is the most expensive of the options, will ever necessarily happen without some sort of broad push on the part of the federal government, probably. But small municipalities have been successful in doing it on their own, utilizing funding available through different revenue streams. But on a county-wide basis, to my understanding, it hasn't been done other than that place up in the UP that secured funding. I forget exactly the name of it, but it was considered quite an anomaly for that to happen.
Because that's why we're so interested in broadband. One of the reasons is all these people that work for the big three or work with big corporations to try to give the option to move up here. We could take advantage of that where they could work from home.
A lot of the
That
emphasis.
sounds like that's not gonna happen.
Well, a lot of the emphasis seemed to be placed on wireless internet connectivity. 5G was talked about, and some communities took stock of the assets in the survey of their vertical assets, they call them. So they're talking about putting things on grain elevator legs, distribution points. Now, the thing that works with those is they have to have fiber optic pushed to those sites. But that's a consideration about, what can be done there. Now, we're also reaching out to the school districts to take advantage of funding opportunities that the schools present. Hasn't been worked out exactly how that can happen, but you figure the schools have a captive amount of money through taxes that they have to fund to carry out their operation. And right now with COVID, the way they're required to have, online presence, and they were caught shorthanded having prepared to do that. One of the mechanisms I think that you'd see is, you can't look at a square mile in Sanilac County where there's no public school presence there in the form of a student of some type. So if that's the case, the saturation of school districts, it could be understood that part of their revenue stream could be directed towards improving the internet capability within that area, a geographic area. Some say, well, yeah, but then Joe Blow, grandma who doesn't have any kids in schools benefiting from it. Well, they're also paying taxes for your school kids. So that argument is valid. So I have high hopes for that. That doesn't seem to be the emphasis. That's thinking way outside the box, but perhaps we can push forward with that and have a meeting with the school board, the districts.
Well, how did these guys respond if you ask them the question about universal service? Because you get to tax their current, customers for universal service. It goes, they're taxing them. And what do they do with that money? It would seem like Sanilac County is one of the most underserved counties in Michigan. And we're right on the cusp of the metro area. So all they have to do is spend a little bit of that money that they're collecting. How are they spending their money for universal service? And the other ones that's mandated through the Telecommunication Act of 90, whatever.
I want to say that when that word was, universal service was brought up, we were talking about speeds and availability. And right now, when you look at these, there was a specific terminology for looking at the map of Michigan, for example, and showing coverage. And they show coverage pretty much everywhere in Michigan, but we all know on the ground that doesn't really work. And the coverage rates are broad, covers almost everything, but the speeds and the usability is like, right? But that's because they're setting that bar so low. I feel like if I remember correctly, the universal service component was saying, yeah, you've got coverage, look at it. It's all green, but it's not usable. Nobody can use it for anything. So I'll bring that question back to them and find out what more specifically is being done on that.
Yeah.
Keep us updated.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, it's a tough question, but
And we know Elon Musk is doing some cool stuff.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
we're gonna leapfrog all this stuff.
That's exactly what was discussed,
Yeah.
Joe. That by the time we get our heads together and figure something out, man, he'll have it.
Technology.
Yeah.
Could we use this block grant for,
I don't know. That's a good idea.
That would only be a drop in the bucket though, right?
I guess it would just go to Worth Township, though.
Okay. Any unfinished business? I don't think we have any. New business, finance and administration. FA 12420.
The Sanilac County Board of Commissioners hereby approves the payment of current claims for 2020 identified on the accounts payable report dated October 27, 2020 for the general bank account in the amount of $105,847.10.
Motion made by Commissioner Haver, supported by Commissioner Dean. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those not in favor, same. Motion carried. FA 12520.
The Sanilac County Board of Commissioners hereby approves the following amendments and transfers, establishes the following accounts seen on page 4 and 5.
Motion by Commissioner Haver, supported by Commissioner Dean. Any discussion?
Could I make a comment?
Yes.
I just wanted to point out that what you're starting to see in this budget amendment is the shifting around to those CARES Act funds. So we received payroll reimbursements. So, we're increasing our transferring to the general fund because those payrolls were already expensed. That would be for April and May, public safety payrolls. And then you'll see the budgets had changed within each of the funds. For instance, central dispatch is a separate fund, health department separate. And then you'll see the transfers, the to and the froms listed on page 5, those coincide with what those individual entities receive. So for instance, DTF's on there, central dispatch. Data processing was included as well. So that's what you're starting to see as we shift around that funding. And you can see that did increase our contingency in the general fund as well, because we placed that revenue in the contingency for now.
But it's earmarked.
Yes.
Okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried. FA 126.
The Sanilac County Board of Commissioners hereby awards the bid to Blank Electric Company at a cost not to exceed $3,632.08 for the purpose of replacing the generator at the Carsonville Tower site with funding from the 9/11 millage line.
Motion made by Commissioner Haver, supported by Commissioner Dean. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, the same. Motion carried. FA 12720.
Sanilac County Board of Commissioners hereby adopts a 2021 proposed resolution, 221 proposed general fund budget and general appropriations act as follows. Further,
I'm sorry.
further hereby schedules a public hearing on the 2021 proposed budget for December 1st, 2020, and directs the board secretary to publish the legal notice.
Motion made by Commissioner Haver, supported by Commissioner Dean. Any discussion?
Yeah, I got a couple of points. I actually have 3 points, 2 of which I've already discussed, and won't reiterate those really. But I still think they still need to be addressed. The other one, I was reading some information in the public domain, and I think it will have an effect on our budget, and we need to consider it. And that was the Supreme Court ruling that declared our foreclosure process to be unconstitutional because it's a taking. And it's unconstitutional at the federal level,
and it's also unconstitutional at the state level. And I think that when you have a significant event like that, you have to look at, is it probable that's going to affect 2020 and 2021? And can we estimate the effect of that? And in both of those, I would say it's probable, it's actually virtually certain. Because when the Supreme Court says that you have a taking, there's no dispute about law. It's just, there's a dispute is only about how much you have to pay. And something like this, the Supreme Court case went back to 2004. That's 16 years ago. And I don't think there is a statute of limitations. If there is, adverse possession is 21 years. General contracts are 6 years, but those are the kind of things that would be settled in any court case. So I think that we have to look at this, and I don't think there's been any provision made, and because it's virtually certain that the way we did it is government at its worst. That's all I'm going to say. And we have to be responsible, do the right thing. I think it needs to be reflected in the budget.
What we did was what every other county in Michigan did under the guidance of the Michigan statute that existed at that time.
Yeah.
The unanswered questions here continue to be, will probably be resolved during future court hearings, will be how many years back it goes. There's an attempt by Oakland County to make it not retroactive at all, only moving forward. We have currently $800,000 set aside for payments on this issue if it comes to that, but we still don't know how many years back it will have to go. So it may have an impact on future budgets, but I think we are protected to a large extent now, particularly in view of the fact that we don't know what the cost will be until we know how many years retroactive they expect to pay it.
Well, I mean, given that the case that the Supreme Court ruled on was from 2004, it seems to indicate that it would be, I mean, you're not going to win.
I don't think the court is completely insensitive to the fact that if they make counties go back 16 years, that you're going to have an enormously detrimental effect on those counties.
This is absolutely government at its worst. This is what communist countries do. They take your house and keep the profits and kick you out. Now, just are we going to continue? We're going to be scumbags to do it because the Michigan legislators, they're not very bright. I mean, they wrote a horrible law, and now we're going to continue to be scumbags and not do the right thing.
I think there's no question moving forward that will not be the case, but the question still is, on a practical level, how many years back are we going to be expected to reimburse?
Well, at least, I mean, the Supreme Court case was from 2004. How can you say that?
That hasn't been stated though clearly.
I don't think that's what Dan is saying. I think what he's saying is,
we don't know, we don't know.
Well, we don't know right now. They could go back to 2004. We're hoping not.
I think to use that as defense right now, that would be remote. I mean, I think that this needs to be looked at, because I just want to put it on the table and make sure that it's out there, because this is a big one.
I think we all understand that.
We're going to continue to we're going to try to kick the can down the road. We're going to be scumbags and not pay them. It's bad enough that what these people had to go through and pay these usurious rates, by the way. I mean, how many of these people even survived this? And now we're just, you kick families out of their houses, you kept all their money. I mean, it's pretty bad. And we use it to fund our pension liability? Come on.
I don't think, no one disagrees that we're going to be settled, that we understand it, but I don't know, some of the commissioner I talked to her the other day, I don't think the government or the state, now this ruling has been made by the Supreme Court, I don't think they're going to go through and break every county government and make them go bankrupt, because there would be no money coming in, and you can't bankrupt every county. So I think they're going to,
it's one of those things where
we have to pay, but hopefully they come out with some kind of thing that's realistically we can pay it.
You have a range of outcomes, and shouldn't we do our job and do our homework and figure out what that range of outcomes are? Okay, worst case, best case. Best case, we get to, just keep rolling along and doing this, or, we get.
I think the 800,000 that we have set aside for this is a mid-range estimate of potential liability, but again, we don't know how many years back we have to go.
Yeah,
What you're saying is taxation is theft.
no, I'm not saying taxation. is bad.
It's, that's what I'm hearing you say.
No. We kept the profits.
Because,
We kept the profit.
because they didn't pay the back
We
taxes.
kept, it's.
And they
it's
lost the property
unconstitutional.
they're in, and the property had value, and the ones that ended up
Right.
within their hands sold it for value. You would do that same thing if you took a car from your neighbor as security for a loan you gave them, and they defaulted on the loan, and you sold the car for much more than you took it in for security. Pawn shops do it all the time.
This is a
That's what
Supreme
happens
Court ruling.
when you do things like that.
It's against the Constitution. It's
The Supreme Court can, but what this puts us into is
It take,
if you don't pay on your property taxes, whip-de-frickin' do. What are they gonna do? The government can't take your house. They can't come and take your house.
so
So,
this is saying that if
so how does the
you
county
own-
have a budget or the
you,
municipality?
$10,000 and they sold it for 100, the county shouldn't keep the 900, the 90,000. The person gets their money back. It's their equity. And they had hard times, whatever. You know, the question is not whether it's the legal issues. There's no question about that. It's just how much.
The Oakland County case was very particular. It wasn't the broad cases across the state. I mean, that was a guy's property that was incredibly valuable. It seemed like he was making a point, and then it was successful. It changed it, you know. It's changing the law, the interpretation of it, but
It's
Well,
unconstitutional.
but those property owners still have the ability to sell the property, pay their taxes.
they always,
Sells before it ever gets to that.
they always do before that happens, but they,
Otherwise, we become.
so many of them choose not to.
Realtors, you know.
What I've been told is that a lot of them are absentee, not absentee owners, but they're folks that die without a will and die without a notification to a next of kin, and nobody knows whose it is. And the minute, because remember, you're talking about townships and villages and cities that are sending notices for back taxes, for property taxes, and nobody's following up to find out if they have a next of kin. They're checking the records, the county records, to see if there was a transfer of the property, and there isn't. It's in the dead person's name. So 3 years later, nobody's been paying the taxes because the dead person's family don't know anything about it. Because there's a disconnect in our society between the living and the dead, I guess. But in a lot of cases, that's what happens, where nobody knew. And then the family finds out when the property is taken, and they look into it and they find out that all of a sudden the county has it and they're auctioning it off, and they're like, hey, what the heck?
Well, we have an event here that we can definitely estimate, and I think that we need to have a range and put it on a piece of paper, put some thought into it, because it could be very, very
Well,
significant.
how does that affect our budget, though? What does that have to do with this? That part I missed, and I don't.
Because we know it. We know that it's out there.
And well,
It's an event.
We
It's
know
an
there's a
event that's
liability.
happened.
There's a pending liability out there for
Yeah.
it.
And the process we have, what we're doing, we can't continue to do, because it's
But we know that
unconstitutional.
in anticipation of a liability, the county treasurer has set aside $800,000 for potential payoff on this.
Are you talking about the fact that we're using the delinquent tax fund for anything at all?
The profits, we can get sued because of the profits, and the thing that argued about is how much do we have to pay back?
Yeah.
And for how far back? I mean, if,
But Trudy's not doing that now.
oh, good, that would be really bad if she was.
Yeah, she's not.
And this decision just came down recently.
In
so
July of 2020.
There's still clarification.
So
for the
it
impact.
affects 2020 and 2021.
There's no spending in here with the anticipated profits from foreclosed property. So in terms of this resolution, I'm not sure.
To the contrary, we've set aside
Yeah,
$800,000.
I'd like to see that.
The tax,
I have a credibility issue with the sources of
tax
information.
funds aren't budgeted. So if we were, I know we have the tax foreclosure fund, we have the 800,000 sitting in the tax foreclosure fund, but if there was additional monies owed, and we may have to rely on that, the delinquent tax revolving.
Oh, so we just have the 800,000 in cash. We haven't set up any liabilities.
We don't know what our liability is.
Well, we should suss it out and look at the range. And
There's that one key variable that we don't know, which is how many years back.
Well, that's,
I mean,
And
that's,
if the state were to come along and say, okay, it's only proactive.
we're not spending that money.
then we have 800,000
So-
extra to spend.
Joe, you're saying you'd
So
like,
what happens if they say that there is no statute of limitations? That's probably.
There'll be a lot of counties that are in a lot worse shape than we
How do
are.
we prepare for that right now for 21? I don't think we can.
You can't.
But I think.
Suss it out, you assign a probability based upon what a reasonable person would do. That's how you do it. And if we don't do it, if we just ignore it,
Well,
then that goes
We
into
haven't
a
ignored it. We
different.
have 800,000.
we have 800,000. That's
800,000 in cash, Dan. We haven't sat down and set up a liability.
But we don't, again, until that one.
There's-
very-
Well, that's what you say. That's one.
Well, do you have
extreme.
better information to know that it's gonna be 16 years? I mean,
Yeah.
the lawyers we heard from said they didn't think so. But
Well, I disagree with that, Dan. I mean, I think it has to be looked at.
it really come down,
We
right?
need to set up a liability. We
I haven't
can
seen a position paper on this thing. This is so significant, it could potentially bankrupt us. Why don't we have a position paper with some data in it that shows us, yes, here's what we did. We were responsible. We responded to this and we really looked at it and gave it some really serious thought, not just tossing it off and saying, well, it's not going to happen. We don't know. Because we should know. We should have an opinion. We should have an estimate. Because it's so significant. And
You just said.
the underlying
years to
behavior
unlimited
associated
years,
with this
right?
is so bad that, I mean, to continue to just ignore it is.
So how would we go back? Would we go back to 1901?
No, I think that they changed the law in 1999 or 1997. So I mean, that would be the range. I mean, I think looking at 04, or certainly looking at the 08 period, where it was just a Holocaust around here.
So we look at the amount of revenue that was gained by foreclosed properties over and above market value, because that's what it comes down to, market value.
Well, that's another disputable.
That's another, just exactly.
But just looking at what was the actual monies received and saying, okay, and setting
Or
up a range.
or was the court case based on what they owed back taxes were market values irrelevant? Because
Well, I mean, the term is just compensation.
Okay, I think
I mean,
based on time, we discussed this, I think, pretty thoroughly. We don't know how far back we gotta go at that down. We do have, excuse me, we do have some money, 800,000. And,
is that highlighted in our budget
No.
as being set aside? So why don't we
it's
just do?
cash in the bank. We haven't set up any liabilities.
So, I mean, can't we just,
We haven't.
you said a position paper, how about a position statement saying that that money is allocated for future expenses incurred through the expectation of this court rule?
I think a reasonable study on this has to be done and we suss out the range and, you know, because you're just guessing right now and I don't like guessing.
well, then let's carry on and we'll have to keep looking on it.
Anyway, that's my third point. I got 3 points that I don't like about this, so.
You, Tara, will keep us advised of any information you get from the state on this.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, I mean, because I haven't heard anything about it. I just happened to be reading some stuff. So I'm like,
yeah,
if I'm a county commissioner and I pay pretty good attention to what's going on and I totally missed it because it came out in July and I was busy with other things and our treasurer came in and said that there was some problems, blah, blah, blah. I didn't, no one rang the bell. I mean, this is an event that I don't like being surprised. And I don't like it when people who got full-time
No,
jobs get
it's
paid
been
to
out
do
there
this,
for a few weeks.
should ring the bell and say, hey, this is an issue.
okay,
In her defense, on several occasions prior to the Supreme Court decision in recent years, we were advised that this case was working its way through. No one expected the Supreme Court to rule the way they did. I understand the philosophical position you have on it, but I think it was a 4-3 vote, actually. So
It was.
by one vote, it could have gone the other way,
Well,
and we wouldn't even be having this discussion right now.
that's-
But we were advised that this case was out there looming for some time prior to that decision coming down in July.
It sounds like what Commissioner O'Meara is asking for is relatively simple. You have a set of dates and a
None of these kind of-
parameter to research, you know,
But we don't
you
know.
put a dollar figure on it in case of this and
I mean, I don't want to be surprised again, if we go back, especially 08, and we see that it's millions and millions of dollars, and that in the worst case, there's so many, it could be very big.
Okay.
And we're gonna be surprised.
Wait a minute.
It could be very big. I mean,
We're just going on and on. We already got a motion and it's been seconded.
Correct.
approved.
Yeah.
We're in the discussion now, and I think we just about discussed that out for the time being. I'm not saying forget about it, but at least we got it out there. People can do your own discussion, and Tara's gonna be looking on if any new regulations or anything comes along. And we get that. Any more discussion on this resolution?
could Trudy give us the amounts that the profits that we've received since like 2004?
Since 2004
Or some date,
or 8.
some date that, could give us at least some view of.
I think that,
Well, it would be reflected,
Specifically.
it would be reflected in the tax foreclosure
Right.
fund that we draw funds out of each year.
Yeah,
right,
That's where that 800,000 is
Right.
sitting right now. So,
well, that's a cumulative
Go back to
balance.
2004.
correct, but
It should be
we've
pretty
drawn
good.
money out of that account on a regular basis too.
So what would that be if we didn't take any money out?
I'll ask her that.
if you look at page 8, number 12, it says be it further resolved that the administrator, controller, and the county treasurer shall authorize the transfer of general fund. I was just wondering, should that be the administrator, controller, and the county treasurer together? Or is this meaning either one can do it, the way it's written?
It says and, not or, so that implies they both have to.
Yeah,
It depends. Some of them require bank transfers, so it would have to be, it would have to include the county treasurer.
So
well, should that be changed then? Because it says, be it further resolved that the administrator / controller and the treasurer should say and or the treasurer.
It depends on the situation.
well, if you have and or, then you're gonna have just one person that could do it.
No, it would say administrator, controller, and the county treasurer are required to transfer. If it was meant to be
Well,
both
that's
of
what
them,
I meant by
it would say
together.
required, it doesn't. It just simply means either or of them can do so. They're both equally authorized to do so.
That would have to be both of them, I think it's because
I would think-
amounts up to our entire
What did
budget.
last year's, but our current present budget say on this?
Same thing.
It's the same.
Same thing? Okay.
Yeah.
I thought it should be, I put together, I just made a little note together, but however you want to word that, that's my thought.
So to summarize, it means treasurer can transfer and then the administrator can transfer independent of one another as they see fit.
No,
Yeah.
that's not what we want,
That's the way it's written now,
but that's not what we want.
but that's why I mentioned it.
Why,
Yeah, let's change.
why would we want them to work together? But that's not been what's happening up to this point.
I don't want either one of them to be, unilaterally be able to transfer around the entire $15 million that we have. I think that,
So that's what we've been doing
just
just
for
for this point.
balance
Hasn't
of
been a
checks and
problem.
controls, it's better control. Because the extreme,
I
See, I-
believe the limit is 20,000. That's in instances, we have funds that sometimes have a negative cash balance towards the end of the year and they cannot end the year in the negative position.
I don't understand, but don't these transfers get presented to the board just like we did a few minutes ago and we authorized it? So none of it gets authorized.
But at year end, when we're working to clean up funds,
Yeah.
there's the last meeting's the 15th. So unless you want a meeting at the end of the year to pick up what we have to make corrections for at the end of the year,
Well, I think,
you're not going to see those.
the
how does it work?
administrator and the treasurer can do that.
Well, it depends. I know Trudy mentioned that she has, she watches the cash, we watch the cash, and it just depends on how the different funds spend their money towards the end of the year and what revenues are coming in. Because they may have earned revenues, but if they're not here and they're in a negative position, we have to correct that cash balance. So basically what that means is they're floated a loan from the general fund to cover their cash needs. And then in the next year, in 2021, that would be reversed and paid back to the general fund.
Well, I think between the two of you, you should be able to do that.
Right. And that's what the process has been.
And that only comes up at the end of the year,
Yes,
because otherwise the oversight is done at this board.
correct.
But that was my concern. The way I read it, I could read it, you could do it, or the treasurer could do it.
Correct.
And I'm saying, I think you both should consult on that. That's what I'm saying. That's my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong. Don't know.
Well, shouldn't it say transfer year-end general fund appropriations between the funds up to the amounts provided, up to the amount, the remaining amounts in each of the funds?
Because what you're
Well, that's
saying
what
is,
I'm
it's
saying
not
now.
worded
Yeah.
to say that.
It doesn't say that.
Even though they're doing it that way, doesn't mean that somebody else couldn't say, hey, I can do that whenever I
50
want.
million.
And I don't have to approve. So, because it doesn't say that it's approved to the board approves or anything.
Yeah.
So if you look at that,
Well,
Tara,
I
and
can
you
see
read that,
where they're not saying that, because like she gets down to the last 2 weeks, we might not have another board meeting.
that's how they're
So-
applying it. But the language seems to suggest they don't have to do it at all. All these appropriations that we get in transfers that we're looking at and approving here in the board meeting doesn't need to happen according to this budget resolution. We authorize through 12 the ability for them to do so as needed whenever they see fit. So while it may work fine right now with the current treasurer and the current administrator controller, it could be a problem with a different individual or,
They're only authorized up to the amount budgeted in that
Okay.
year's budget.
yeah.
So you can't go beyond that.
Still, that's a pretty significant transfer that we,
Typically, those transfers are done quarterly.
yeah.
So the appropriation transfers
Mhm.
to our component units.
Could we say something like, be it further resolved that during the year-end closing process, the administrator, controller, and treasurer shall be authorized to transfer year-end general blah, blah, blah appropriations between funds up to the residual year-end amounts provided in the budget? Could we do that?
You know, when I read this, this is for those quarterly transfers.
Oh, okay. Then let's just
Sorry,
say, let's just say quarterly then. Quarterly close.
The appropriations are typically done quarterly.
But I still think that both of you should
Yes.
work on that together. That's my opinion.
Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't.
This depends on if it needs a bank transfer or not.
Well, I don't care who does the transfer, but you both kind of should be in agreement on doing that.
But all the quarterly close transfers are approved by the board, right?
Well, if it's budgeted, we go ahead and make
Just do
those, yeah.
You ever tell us about it?
Well, it would appear in the revenue and expenditure reports. Those are posted on the website, so we do have that information out there. But those quarterly transfers, if they're budgeted, they take place. That would be our payments, say, to the health department, to CMH. We have to fund dispatch budget, data processing. That's what when we look at the general fund, all of those transfer outs that are listed in the general fund, that's what we're taking care of.
But that is,
Do you do that by yourself? Or do you work with,
No, generally I don't for those. We don't work with Trudy. If there is an instance where there's a bank transfer requirement, for instance, thinking of the jail payment, the bond payment, so that we would work with the treasurer. But not every instance requires a bank transfer. Therefore, it's just a journal entry on our side.
okay?
So if you look at, if you want to look at it, let me see here. It would be page 35 in the packet. It's all of these transfers. So these are, we fund Friend of the Court, there's the law library transfer, data processing, delinquent tax revolving fund, that's the BSNA software loan. We have the jail project, so that's payment to the bonds. They're all done quarterly based on what's budgeted. So you break it down into 4 payments. And the majority of them are journal entries unless they're bond payments.
And any line item can be transferred, right?
Any line item as far as,
The transferring of the funds between the line items.
well, all of those would flow through here. If it's over 2,000, you'd see them come through within this budget motion. So all of these here,
Yeah.
so any changes to the budget itself, if it's over 2,000, you're seeing that flow through here.
So all those transfers will be approved by the commissioners. Right.
These ones, the transfers that we budget that I referenced on page 33, those we
Yeah.
take care of through journal entries. So those are done quarterly based on what's budgeted.
Don't that cover that in number 20, actually? What you're talking about, anything over,
Should we change on number 12 that, we got the 2021 budget? Shouldn't we put the year-end budget or something so we don't have to deal with that every year?
No, because this covers the quarterly closing.
I don't know that it really needs to be changed, to be honest, but that's my opinion. If you wish to change it, we certainly can.
I mean, you got provided for in this 2021 budget. What are you gonna do next year? You're gonna have to have the
This-
2022 budget.
Nope, it's 2021. So next year, we'll start making quarterly payments.
For 4 times.
Yes.
But after that, then you gotta go in and change this to get it for
and
the
we
next
do.
year.
We do, we update that.
Yeah, well,
This read the same for the 2020 budget, only it said 2020. So 12 was, the language in 12 was the same with the exception of the date was changed.
Yes,
Yeah.
correct.
but why do we have to go and change that every year?
So we can have discussions like this.
Yeah,
I mean, hey, there's a new board coming on, there'll be a new perspective, a new set of questions, it's reasonable, just like anything else that we don't do for, long periods of time. It doesn't cost that much to review this. You're bringing up a point that there's 3 different of opinions on this very item here that we've discovered. Not sure
Well-
where we want to move forward, but
the 2021 budget, I just thought you could put it at the year-end budget or something like that. And you wouldn't have to change it every time, every year. That's all I was saying.
I
Follow me?
yes, I do understand what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. That way it would be, you would read it, it would be in effect the way it, if you put towards the end of the year. In the end of the fiscal year.
so what do you think it should say, Bob?
Well, it could be
And
up to
or?
the amounts provided for in the fiscal year, presently fiscal year, something like that, in fact. I just don't like going in and changing things every year. If we can put something in,
I like changing things because it makes you read it. So I think there's an advantage.
You're going to have to pass a new budget resolution a year from now anyway for the following year.
Yeah.
To annual things.
But so there's no problem with the language of administrative controller and county treasurer. That means, as it's written, that either one of them can do it independent of one another. And that's the way it's been acted upon, right? And it also is such that you can do so without presenting it to the board necessarily for approval. It can be done. The only question I have is, doesn't this item allow you to do so at any time of the year, notwithstanding quarterly? It could be any time. Where does it say that it's,
Typically, we do the appropriations quarterly because, as you know, the general fund is typically quite in the negative for the,
is there anything that would be bad if you chose to do so whenever you felt? If you transferred funds, could there be an episode of unethical behavior happening because of it? Could there be
transfer funds from the general fund to Tara's personal vacation fund or something stupid like that?
Most of those are journal entries, so it's basically a transfer between the fund within our general ledger.
I mean, there's oversight, right?
Right.
We're looking at it, because
If
when,
if there's a bank transfer, I'm gonna have to go through Trudy to get a bank transfer to my personal account. I can't just do that on my own. Or
So that-
Christie couldn't do that on her
there's
own.
usually someone watching over that, making sure that
Yeah,
that
we
they
have
line up.
some balances in place.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the safety provisions for making sure that we don't have, what's the word when people steal money from accounts? It's an E word, but anyhow, thank you.
Yeah, there you go.
There's no chance, there's no chance for that. This language doesn't like say, hey, you don't have to bother looking at it. Okay.
There's always a chance that there's collusion, but.
Hmm.
Let's.
I got another
let's move on.
change, but I don't think I'm gonna make it.
You're not gonna
Okay,
make-
so
Huh?
let's leave it as is then.
Well, I'm on number 20 now, but I'm not even gonna bring that up. That one should be changed too. Any more discussion?
No,
I just don't understand what this board is. And number
With Board of
20, by this board. Why did you put the Board of Commissioners?
but
That's easy. I like your idea. Please do that, Tara.
Which one?
or we can just define it. Just define it someplace and
Brought it up earlier.
Number 20.
Yeah, I mean,
just
I
define
don't
it.
know what other board approves the budget.
The Board of Commissioners.
In number 3, you could just put it in parentheses, the board. And that would define it.
Any other discussion? Okay. We approved that and are we,
All the vote on it.
yeah. On the budget adoption amendments, you got a motion made and, okay, we had a discussion. All those in favor say aye.
It's a roll call, isn't it?
Will this be a roll call? No, not this one. We're good.
Okay. I'm gonna say no.
Okay, all those opposed, okay. Motion carried. That's it, eh?
Man,
For me.
Yeah.
You guys have public comment.
That's it. Oh, I gotta go back here. Okay, public comments. We don't have a closed session today. We need a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Court.
Motion by Commissioner Dean, supported by Commissioner Wyatt that we adjourned. All those in favor say aye.
I.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried.
See where the crisis is going on.
This was the day you wanted a quick one.
I said that, I thought, I jinxed myself. I should be back in a half an hour.